We had just settled into what felt like the start of a new chapter in our lives. The house wasn't perfect in the glossy magazine sense, but to us it was everything we'd wanted. Spacious enough without being overwhelming, quiet without feeling isolated. My girlfriend and I had been searching for months, and when we found it, we knew it was the right place. We brought Bella, our cat, along for the move, and watching her explore every corner of the house made it feel even more like home. But there was one detail that kept tugging at us, something we noticed the first day we arrived. The property directly to our right wasn't quite normal. Half-finished renovations, walls stripped of paint, and piles of wood leaning against the side. It looked like someone had planned to restore it but simply walked away midway. What made it stranger was the missing fence between our garden and that house's yard. Instead of privacy, there was just an open gap, a straight path connecting the two back gardens as though the properties bled into each other. At first, we told ourselves it wasn't a big deal. Maybe the owner would return and finish the work. Still, it was unsettling to have that kind of open access. And then there were the men. A group of them lived behind the abandoned house, often crossing through its yard as if it were a shortcut. We figured they must know the owner, but it added to the uneasy feeling. The real moment came one evening as we sat outside, enjoying the cool air. Out of nowhere, we noticed a figure in the window of the abandoned house. He wasn't moving. He wasn't smiling. He was just staring. The first few days in the new house carried a kind of fragile calm, the kind where you keep waiting for something to go wrong but nothing ever does. My girlfriend and I slipped into a rhythm almost immediately. Mornings spent rushing to get to work, evenings spent testing out which corner of the living room caught the best light, late nights wandering through half-unpacked boxes as if we might find a secret passage hidden in our own belongings. It felt good, almost too good, like the calm before a storm. At night, Bella would curl up in the middle of our bed, purring like the world had never known a darker thought. Watching her sleep so peacefully gave us a sense of security we couldn't quite explain. She was our little signal of safety, and in those first nights we convinced ourselves that if anything were wrong with this place, our cat would have told us in her own way. But the silence surrounding the house felt different than what we were used to. It wasn't the kind of quiet where you could hear crickets or the wind brushing through leaves. This silence felt heavy, like the air itself had weight. And then there was the property next door. It wasn't just abandoned, it was neglected, suspended halfway between demolition and construction. Wooden beams stuck out at odd angles, piles of bricks lay scattered like forgotten toys, and the windows looked like blank eyes staring into nothing. Every time I glanced toward it, I felt an unspoken unease, as if the building itself resented our presence. The missing fence made it worse. From our back garden, you could look straight into that yard without obstruction. It felt less like two separate properties and more like one twisted, uneven landscape that belonged to neither of us. The open space between them wasn't comforting, it was an invitation. I didn't like how easy it would be for someone, anyone, to step through that gap and end up just outside our door. The first incident came sooner than expected. I had stepped outside one evening to take the trash out. The sky was fading, painted in deep purples and blues, the kind of color that makes you want to linger just a little longer. I remember standing at the edge of the garden, breathing it in, when I caught a glimpse of movement. Across the way, through the collapsed remains of a half-broken wall, someone was standing in the abandoned property. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just a shadow blending against the darkness of the house. But then the figure shifted. It was a man, tall, narrow-shouldered, with his head slightly tilted as if he was examining me. No wave, no expression, not even the courtesy of pretending to look away. He just stood there, body stiff, eyes locked in my direction. I froze. The trash bag dangled from my hand like a useless prop. A dozen rational thoughts tried to fight their way forward. Maybe he was a worker returning to check the property, maybe he was just lost, but none of them explained the way he stared. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't surprise. It was deliberate. A held gaze that pinned me to the spot. I backed toward the door without looking away. Even when I finally stepped inside, I could feel his eyes pressing through the walls. My girlfriend asked what was wrong, and I lied, brushing it off with some excuse about the wind picking up. But I didn't forget. That night, when I tried to sleep, every creak of the house felt like footsteps, every brush of the curtains felt like someone watching. The next morning, I told myself I had overreacted. People cut through the gardens all the time, maybe he was just another passerby taking a shortcut. But when I looked out the window, I saw something that chilled me far worse than the stare. The gate connecting the abandoned yard to ours, something I was sure had been shut the night before, was wide open. I stood there for a long time, unable to move, staring at that open gate. Bella meowed at my feet, brushing against my leg as if she sensed my unease. My girlfriend called from the kitchen, asking if I wanted coffee, and I forced myself to answer, but my voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin and shaky. I told myself I'd close the gate later, but I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to step outside again that morning. That evening, as the light faded once more, the silence returned heavier than ever. And when I glanced toward the abandoned house, I saw the same window where he had stood before. It was empty now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't gone anywhere. He was just waiting, hidden in the darkness, watching us from a place we couldn't see. The nights after that felt longer. Every sound seemed amplified, the creak of floorboards, the low hum of the refrigerator, even Bella's claws tapping softly against the wood as she wandered from room to room. My girlfriend teased me for jumping at every noise, but I could tell she wasn't entirely at ease either. She had a way of pretending everything was fine, even when her shoulders stiffened or her eyes flicked to the windows more than usual. One evening, while unpacking another round of boxes, I caught her pausing by the back door. She stood there for a moment too long, staring through the glass panes that opened to the garden. When I asked what she was looking at, she shook her head quickly, almost too quickly, and muttered something about the shadows looking strange. Neither of us wanted to admit what we both felt, that the house next door wasn't just empty, it was watching us in some way. The shortcut traffic didn't help. Almost every other night, we spotted the young men cutting through the abandoned garden. Sometimes they moved quickly, heads down as if they were eager to get somewhere else. Other times, they lingered, whispering to each other, tossing empty cans against the broken fence posts. Their presence blurred the line between intruder and neighbor, and I never knew whether to call the police or just let it go. Then came the knocking. It was around 2 in the morning when it happened. A sharp, deliberate knock against the back door, not frantic, not playful, measured. I sat up instantly, heart hammering in my chest. My girlfriend stirred, groggy, asking what was wrong. I hushed her, straining to listen. Another knock followed, slower this time, as if whoever was there knew we were awake. I grabbed the nearest object I could use as a weapon, a heavy flashlight from the nightstand, and crept toward the kitchen. Bella darted under the couch, tail puffed up, a silent alarm that screamed louder than any words. When I reached the door, the knocking stopped. My breath fogged the glass as I peered out, but the garden was empty. The gate, though, it swung lazily on its hinge, wide open again. I bolted the door, shut the curtains, and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I found footprints in the mud, fresh and deep, leading straight to our patio. They stopped only a few feet from the door, facing inward, as though the person had stood there for a long time just looking at the house. That was the moment my girlfriend stopped pretending everything was fine. She tried to mask it with nervous jokes, but I saw how she double-checked the locks, how she kept glancing toward the windows whenever she thought I wasn't looking. Days passed with no new incidents, but the tension never left. Every time I heard a noise outside, I found myself holding my breath, waiting. And then one evening, while sitting out back, I felt it again, the stare. I looked up at the abandoned house, and there he was. The same man, framed in the window, body stiff, head tilted just slightly, eyes locked on me. He didn't blink. He didn't move. The room behind him was completely dark, as if the house itself swallowed any light. I whispered my girlfriend's name without taking my eyes off him. She joined me, followed my gaze, and gasped softly. Now we were both trapped under that blank stare, frozen in our own garden like prey caught in a spotlight. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before the figure finally stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. Neither of us said a word. We just went inside, locked every door, and sat in silence, listening for the sound of footsteps that never came. But the damage was done. The house we had loved so much already felt different, less like a home, more like a stage where something sinister was waiting behind the curtain. After that night, we stopped using the back garden altogether. What had once been the part of the house we loved most, the open space, the view of the trees, the sound of birds in the morning, became something we avoided like a wound that refused to heal. Even Bella stayed away, which was unusual. She had loved prowling along the edges of the garden fence, tail twitching with excitement at every rustle of leaves. Now she refused to go near the door, hissing whenever we tried to coax her outside. We told ourselves it was temporary. Maybe the man was a squatter, maybe the group of kids were just restless teens. People had their reasons for being in strange places. But those explanations felt thinner with each passing day. The truth was simpler, the abandoned house wasn't empty. Something lived there, whether it was a person, a group, or something worse, and it had chosen to focus on us. One night, while I was brushing my teeth, I heard my girlfriend call from the living room. Her voice wasn't panicked, but it was sharp, urgent in a way that made me drop everything and rush to her. She was standing by the front window, pale and stiff, pointing across the street. There, half hidden by a tree, stood the same figure. He wasn't watching from the abandoned house this time. He was closer, bolder, standing out in the open under the dim orange glow of the street lamp. His head was tilted again, that same unnatural angle, and though I couldn't make out his features, I could feel the weight of his stare pressing against us. I reached for my phone, ready to call the police, but when I looked back up, he was gone. Vanished into the dark in the span of a single breath. We did call the police eventually, after another night of knocking, this time at the front door, loud enough to rattle the frame. The officers who arrived were polite but dismissive. They walked the perimeter, shined their flashlights into the abandoned property, and came back shaking their heads. Probably kids, one of them said, scribbling half-hearted notes on a pad. These places attract all kinds. We'll do a few extra patrols, but there's not much else we can do without evidence. Evidence. As if the muddy footprints, the open gates, the knocking in the dead of night weren't enough. After the police left, the silence felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just quiet, it was mocking. Like the house itself knew they hadn't taken us seriously. That was the first night I set up a camera. It wasn't much, just an old motion detection unit I'd used in my last apartment, but it was something. I placed it facing the garden, aimed squarely at the gate. If anything, or anyone, came through, I'd have proof. The first 2 nights, nothing. A few flickers from passing cars, a stray cat wandering past, the wind rustling the bushes. But on the 3rd night, I woke to the camera alert on my phone. My hands shook as I opened the footage. There he was. The man. He stepped through the open gate slowly, deliberately, like he knew he was being watched. He didn't come all the way to the door this time. Instead, he stopped halfway into the garden, standing in the moonlight with that same tilted head. He stayed there for nearly 15 minutes, unmoving, before turning back toward the abandoned house and disappearing into the darkness. I watched the video 3 times before showing my girlfriend. She cried when she saw it, not because of what he did, but because of how still he was. Completely motionless, as if frozen in time, except for the subtle rise and fall of his chest. That day we talked seriously about leaving. Selling the house, breaking the lease, whatever it took to get away. But moving takes time, and fear doesn't wait. The very next evening, I heard the footsteps. Not outside this time, inside. I was in the kitchen when the sound echoed through the ceiling above me. Slow, deliberate steps crossing from one side of the upstairs hallway to the other. My girlfriend was beside me. Bella was curled up in the corner. We were all accounted for. I grabbed the flashlight again and crept up the stairs, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. The hallway was empty. Every door stood open, every room just as we'd left it. But the sound lingered in my ears, heavy and undeniable. Someone had been walking up there. That night, neither of us slept. We stayed huddled on the couch, listening to the silence, waiting for the next sound to prove we weren't losing our minds. The following day, I went through the house inch by inch. Every closet, every crawl space, even the attic. I wanted proof, something solid I could hold up to my girlfriend and say, this is it, this is what we're dealing with. But I found nothing. No broken locks, no forced windows, no trace that anyone had been inside. The house looked normal. Safe, even. But safety isn't the same as feeling safe. That evening, we tried to distract ourselves. We ordered takeout, put on a movie, did everything we could to ignore the way the shadows stretched across the walls. But around midnight, Bella started acting strange again. She bolted upright on the couch, ears flat, eyes fixed on the staircase. At first, I thought she was just spooked by a sound outside. But then I heard it too, the faint creak of a step, as if weight was pressing down on the wood. I grabbed the flashlight and edged closer, whispering for my girlfriend to stay behind me. The house was silent again, but Bella didn't move. She kept staring at the stairs, tail puffed up, a low growl rumbling from her chest. I took the first step up, every nerve in my body screaming. Halfway up, I froze. A shadow moved at the top of the stairs. It wasn't mine. For a split second, I saw it clearly, tall, thin, head tilted just like before. And then it was gone, vanishing into the darkness of the hallway. I rushed up, flashlight beam slicing through the dark, but the hallway was empty. Every room stood wide open, mocking me with their stillness. I searched until my legs shook, until sweat ran cold down my back, but there was nothing there. When I finally went back downstairs, my girlfriend was pale, clutching Bella like a lifeline. She didn't even ask what I'd seen. The look on my face told her enough. From then on, the house no longer felt like ours. We stopped sleeping in the bedroom, too afraid of the upstairs hallway. The days blurred together. I barely worked. She barely ate. Every creak of the house set us on edge, every gust of wind against the windows made us flinch. And then the camera caught him again. It was a weeknight, around 3 in the morning. I woke to another alert and opened the footage with a sinking feeling. This time, he didn't stop in the garden. He came right up to the door. The figure stepped out of the shadows, closer and closer, until his face was only inches from the lens. The video quality was grainy, but it didn't matter. His eyes were wide, unblinking, locked straight into the camera. His head tilted further than seemed natural, as if the bones in his neck had given way. He stayed like that for over a minute, unmoving, just breathing. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and pressed it against the glass of the door. I slammed the laptop shut, heart racing, every muscle screaming at me to run. But where would we go? I showed my girlfriend the footage in the morning, and that was it. She broke down. We couldn't stay. Not another night. We packed bags, just the essentials, clothes, Bella's food, important documents, and left to stay with a friend across town. For the first time in weeks, we slept through the night. No knocking, no footsteps, no heavy silence pressing in on us. Just rest. But rest doesn't last forever. The morning after, I drove back to the house alone to grab a few more things. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt it immediately, the weight, the unease, thicker than before. The front door was ajar. I knew I had locked it. I knew. I should have called the police. I should have turned around and left. But some part of me needed to see for myself, to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. The curtains swayed slightly, though the windows were closed. And on the living room floor, just beneath the camera, lay a single handprint smudged in dirt. Long fingers, pressed hard into the wood, angled toward the couch where we had been sleeping. I didn't touch the handprint. Just stood there, staring at it, my skin crawling with the certainty that whoever, or whatever, left it had been inside while we were asleep. I could almost picture it, standing there in the dark, head tilted, watching us curled up on the couch, too afraid to climb the stairs. I backed out of the house slowly, heart hammering in my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel like the owner of that house. I felt like an intruder. Like I was the one trespassing on something else's space. When I got back to my girlfriend and told her what I'd seen, she didn't argue. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "We're done," with a finality I'd never heard in her voice before. And she was right. We couldn't fight it. We couldn't reason with it. We couldn't even prove what it was. All we could do was leave. So we did. We stayed with friends for 2 weeks while we searched for a new place. In that time, we didn't go back once. Not to pack the rest of our belongings, not to check on the property, nothing. We abandoned it just as thoroughly as the house next door had been abandoned. But leaving didn't bring the relief we expected. For nights after, I still dreamed of the figure in the garden, the way his head tilted, the way his eyes seemed to burn even through a grainy lens. I'd wake drenched in sweat, convinced I'd hear knocking at the door again. My girlfriend started keeping the blinds closed at all times, even in our friend's home. Bella refused to settle, pacing constantly as if she expected him to appear around every corner. One evening, while scrolling through my phone, I opened the camera app without thinking. The footage was still there. Every clip. Every moment he'd walked through the gate, stood in the garden, pressed his hand to the glass. I should have deleted it. Any sane person would have. Some part of me needed the reminder that it had been real. That I hadn't imagined it all. The police never followed up. We didn't push them. What would we say? That a man who never spoke, never broke in, and never touched us had ruined our lives simply by existing on the other side of the fence. They'd never believe it. And yet, even now, I know we weren't the first, and we won't be the last. The abandoned house is still standing. The gate still hangs open. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see him there, waiting, watching, head tilted in that impossible way. I wonder if someone else has moved into our old place. If they're sitting out in the garden one evening, enjoying the quiet, only to feel the weight of his stare from across the fence. And if they do, if they see what we saw, I wonder if they'll leave fast enough. Or if they'll stay just a little too long, giving him enough time to step out of the shadows and into their lives the way he did ours. Because that's what it felt like in the end, not that we had stumbled into his world, but that he had followed us into ours. And no matter how far we've run, no matter how many doors we lock or blinds we shut, the thought that keeps me awake at night is simple. What if he's still watching? We never went back to that house. The keys are still somewhere in a drawer, but neither of us can bring ourselves to touch them. It doesn't feel like ours anymore. It feels like a place that belongs to him, whoever, or whatever, he was. Even now, weeks later, we talk about it constantly, as if saying it out loud makes it less real. But the truth is, no amount of retelling can erase the image of that tilted head, those unblinking eyes pressed to the glass. Some things stay in you forever. And here's what unsettles me most. If we caught him on camera, if we saw him with our own eyes, how many others never do? How many people are sitting in their living rooms right now, blinds wide open, doors unlocked, convinced they're safe because they've never noticed the figure standing just out of sight? That's why I'm sharing this. Not to scare you for fun, not to exaggerate, but to remind you, we weren't special. We were just unlucky enough to look at the right moment, to hit play at the wrong time. So check your cameras. Lock your doors. Trust your pets when they act strange. And if you ever catch someone, or something, staring back at you through the window, don't wait for answers. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Leave, while you still can. Because the scariest part of our story isn't what happened inside that house. It's knowing he's still out there. Somewhere. Watching. Waiting for the next open door, the next unsuspecting couple to move in and make themselves at home. And if you've ever seen him, if you've ever caught that same shadow lingering in your garden, let us know in the comments. Share your story. Maybe together we can piece together who, or what, he really is. If this story unsettled you even half as much as it unsettled us, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more, and hit the bell so you never miss another upload. Your support helps us keep telling these stories, even the ones that follow you long after the video ends. Sleep well.